What's up, Node.js developers, and welcome to another live build. Today, we are going to integrate Stripe payments in React Native, and with that, we're going to be able to charge customers in an e-commerce project. So this Stripe integration is going to be done inside the e-commerce project that we started in the previous episodes, but today we're going to focus specifically on charging and integrating Stripe in React Native, especially using Expo for our mobile applications. And the rest of our tech stack is going to be on the backend, we're going to use Node.js. So whenever integrating with Stripe, we also have to write some server-side code to make sure that our payments are secure. And we're going to integrate the payments and Stripe into our e-commerce project. So, as I said, this is part of a bigger project, but if you're interested to learn, if you're building an application and want to integrate Stripe payments, I think you can watch this tutorial by the end and you're gonna have a better understanding on how you can integrate Stripe yourself and what it takes to do that. But this the project that I'm going to use to showcase the Stripe integration is going to be our full stack e-commerce project. This we already have done 4 episodes before. In the first one, we covered the backend with REST API and Node.js. Second one, we have done the user-side application, which is a mobile application built with React Native and Expo. And previous episode was the dashboard, the admin side dashboard built with Next.js. And today, as I said, we're gonna focus only on the Stripe payments to integrate and handle payments in our application. Initially, we're going to do the one-on-one payments where we, as the application owner, we're gonna own the Stripe account and we're gonna charge the funds. We're gonna go to our Stripe account, and by the end of this video, we're also going to try to integrate and build the marketplace features that are offered by Stripe, in which we can go ahead and allow other payment providers to integrate with our system and maybe sell and get paid directly on their bank account. So we're gonna start with integrating the payments first, and after that we're gonna do the multi-party payments where different sellers, different businesses can work, and this way we can build a marketplace with multiple entities. So let's go ahead, and if you are ready, I think I'm ready and we can get started. As always, I prepare for you the prerequisites, the guide, so you can get it at assets.notjust.dev/ecom. And when you go there, you're gonna find a couple of documentations for this project. And the one you're interested in is in the payments with Stripe. Here we're gonna have some important documentation and some step-by-steps that we have to follow today. So let's go ahead and roll the intro and get started. Okay, so here we are. Hello everyone who is joining us live. Pro Evils, thank you very much for the donation. Thank you, I appreciate that. Love the content. Nice, thank you very much. You were here yesterday. So Mia is saying use CLI how to implement Stripe. We are gonna use Expo and we're gonna integrate Stripe with Expo. Excited for this one. Yeah, me too. Super excited about this one. And just before getting started, let me cover one topic. Someone was asking me, they heard that it's not possible to integrate Stripe or third-party payment providers in React Native applications, or in general in mobile applications that are on App Store or on Google Play. And there is some truth in that, but there are cases where you can do that. So in case where the users are paying for some digital stuff that they are going to use inside your application. For example, if they are unlocking some features in your application, if they are unlocking some additional content, in that case, the payment for that transaction should be made through Apple and Google. So that's why they are taking 30% a 30% cut And there is no way around that. Like you cannot go ahead and integrate Stripe to provide like a subscription for your application or additional features. However, if a transaction is done for something that you're exchanging in real life, for example, I'm selling my headsets, I put it on a marketplace, and if a person is buying those headsets, that transaction can actually can be handled through a third-party provider, for example Stripe, and this way you don't have to pay 30% of this transaction to Apple or Google. If you, for example, are selling books, physical books, not digital books, but physical books, if basically there is a physical transaction and the application is just to fulfill that transaction. If you are paying for a haircut, that's not a physical transaction. I mean, there is a service that is being provided, but the application there is just to handle the transaction, not to necessarily provide the value. So if that's the case, you can actually use Stripe and other third-party payment providers, and specifically in an e-commerce application, you wouldn't build an e-commerce application where you have to pay 30% cut to Apple and Google. That's why it's okay, and you can and you should integrate Stripe or other payments providers. Stripe is not the only one, but we're gonna focus on Stripe today. So I hope that is clear. And before we jump into the implementation phase, here is our application that we're gonna use. The project you can also find in the description below if you want to get the source code of our e-commerce application. It's going to be on GitHub, and when you clone it, you're gonna see 3 folders. API, this is our Express API. E-commerce mobile, this is our Expo mobile application that we can see here. And dashboard is the notjust dashboard. You can go ahead and run the e-commerce mobile. For that, you're gonna need the .env file. That is going to point to your local API. For the local API, you can go ahead and duplicate the .env example, create the .env file, and add the Postgres URL, connection URL here for the database. You can either run Postgres locally, or the easiest way to do that, you can use Genesio. After you create an account, you can go ahead there and go into the databases. Give me just 1 second. On Genesio, you can go to database, you can go ahead and create a database and then get the connection string from here so that you can initialize the connection of your local API with Genesio. After that, you can go ahead and from API install the dependencies, install node modules with npm install, and then you can run npm by going into cd API. You're gonna first do npm install to install the dependencies, and after that you're gonna do npm run db migrate. And this is going to create and generate the database files in your Postgres database tables. Then you're gonna have database tables ready for you to go ahead and interact and build and add your products. If you want to add some dummy products, you're gonna find them in the guide, in the second project, in the Expo project. Here you have the SQL commands that would insert some dummy products. You can go ahead and copy them, and back in your Genesio, you can press action on your database, view data, and this is going to open an SQL editor where you can paste your insert commands, and this is going to insert some dummy products that you can work with. And that's it. Then you can go ahead, create an account, and sign in from your project. After that is done, you can go ahead and start your API by running npm run dev. This is going to start our API. I think for me it's already running, so I'm going to do it again. It's running on port 3001, and it's ready for our e-commerce mobile to connect to it. You can go ahead in the e-commerce mobile in the .env. I'm going to comment this out and say that our API URL is the local host 3001 and it doesn't need the final slash. Now you can go ahead, open a new terminal, go into ecommerce mobile, again do npm install to install the dependencies, and then npm start. This is going to start our Expo project and is going to connect it with our local API. From here, we can either scan the QR code with Expo Go on the physical device on iOS or Android, or if we have Android emulator simulators, we can run them here, which I'm going to do. So here, that's what you should have. And now we are ready to go ahead and integrate our payments, because our application is ready for us to view products. We can go ahead and add them to cart. We can shop more products. After that, we can go to the cart and press checkout. At the moment, we are simply creating the order, but I would also like to charge the user for that order to handle the payments. So that's what we're gonna do today. And if you're ready, let's go ahead in our documentation that you get by going to ss.notjust.dev/ecom. You're gonna find the links in the description below. And here I'm going to open the documentation from Stripe. We're gonna need it, and also documentation from Expo. We're gonna need it in a second. But first thing that we have to do is to create a Stripe account if you don't already have one. And after you have a Stripe account, which I already do, I'm going to go ahead and create a sandbox environment. A sandbox environment is helpful for us to test our integrations and develop our integrations without us having to use real money. So we test everything with fake money, and then when ready, we can move to production. So here in your dashboard, you can go to sandboxes and you can create a new sandbox that we can call e-commerce. We can go ahead and do a blank configuration. Let's do create sandbox. And this is going to be like a very minimal and new Stripe account ready for us to integrate with. Doesn't have any charges yet, but as soon as we're gonna handle some payments, we're gonna see the analytics here in our overviews. At the top, we're gonna see our API keys, which we're gonna need them in a second. But other than that, like this is the dashboard for our sandbox that we are going to use. The next step, with Stripe, we need, as I said, some code to be handled server side and some code to be handled client side. And the most important part, let me see if I can find that Stripe. If I can find the diagram. I think this should be one. Come on. So let me double check if that's the flow that we're going to use. Okay. Yeah, so here are all the entities that we're going to have to interact with, starting with the customer, which is the end user that is using our application. The end user is going to use our client-side application, which is going to be the mobile application that we have here. So he's going to go add some products to his shopping cart, for example, like this, and go to the checkout page. Before we press checkout, what we should do is we will send information about this checkout page or about this order to the server. Now the server is going to contain our private key for Stripe and is going to be able to communicate with Stripe API securely. our server is going to tell Stripe, hey, I think our customer wants to pay for this order. This is going to be the total amount. This is going to be the currency. Can you create a payment intent? And a payment intent is nothing more than a way to track the payment across its life cycle, from initializing to trying to pay. If it fails, we're going to have like all the logs there. So it doesn't mean that the user paid now, it's just an intention to pay. Stripe is going to create that payment intent, is going to give it us back to the server, and from the server we're going to only return to the client side the secret for that payment intent. Now, knowing that secret, which only our server can generate, our client, when the user presses checkout, is going to say is going to open a payment sheet. The customer then will provide his credit card details and press pay, from where the communication is going to happen from client directly to Stripe, because we already generated everything on the server. So now we know that if a client has this client secret, that means that it's an authorized client and he can communicate directly with Stripe. He's going to try to handle that payment, and if it's successful, the Stripe will return back the payment intent with the status succeeded. So these are the two steps. First, we need to go ahead and create a payment intent, and after that, through our application, we present a payment sheet and handle that payment intent. So that's why we have both code on the client side and on the server side. And we're going to start with server-side code. And let's go ahead and open the documentation here at the top, Stripe React Native SDK. Let's press on the first one, mobile payment elements. And here is the documentation for accepting a payment in React Native. The first step is to set up Stripe, and here is the server-side setup. All we have to do is install Stripe with npm on our API, on our server side. Our API is the API folder. So let's go ahead in a new terminal. Let's navigate to API, and here let's install Stripe. Now, if we look into the package.json of the API, we have Stripe 17 for me. Now we're going to have to create some routes and some controllers for us to create that payment intent, and maybe some additional endpoints on our API to communicate securely with Stripe. So let's go ahead in the routes and create a new folder called Stripe. In the Stripe, I'm going to create a new file, index.ts, and here we're going to start by importing router from Express. We're going to create a router. We're gonna define some endpoints here, endpoints, and at the end we're going to export default router. Now this router, we need to hook it into our whole API. So back in our API source index, the main file, let's go ahead and import Stripe routes from our route Stripe index and add it here on our application use. We're gonna hook it up to the /Stripe endpoint, and we're gonna put there the Stripe routes. Perfect. Hello, Dana, how are you doing? Hello, Mike. Hello, Hacker777. Hacker777 is asking. I have a subscription on my application, but I'm not using Google or Apple. I'm using Paystack. Will it give me issues with deploying? I'm not sure what Paystack is, but if the payments are not going through Apple or Google when you're providing a subscription for application. If you're providing a subscription for, I don't know, how's it called? For a house cleaner, in that case, maybe, because the service is provided not in the application. The service is provided outside the application. But if you're providing a subscription to use your application, in that case, it should go for Apple and Google. So yes, it's not gonna pass the reviews. Why use Express when you have Next.js? Because I wanted a REST API. I wanted a tutorial covering how to build a RESTful API. That's why. Hey, you do workout or some exercise or code whole day? I was working out a lot in the past. Nowadays, I'm skipping a little bit the gym, which I'm really ashamed of, but I'm gonna get back to it. This time is quite a busy season, so I'm pushing like very, very hard with content that you see here on our channel very often, and also with our upcoming course, the React Native Mastery, that is taking a lot of time. But at the same time, it's very fulfilling. I'm very happy to see all of you guys here enjoying and learning new stuff. Okay, so now that we have connected Stripe here, we can go back into the Stripe router and we're gonna start adding these routes. Usually how we split everything up, if we have a look at an example from previous streams, for example, under products in index, we only keep the routes, for example, router.get, but the logic, the controller, what should happen when we send the request there, we separated it into the separate file called controller. So let's do the same here for Stripe. I'm going to create a new file, Stripe controller.ts. And here let's import request and response from Express. And let's start by, we're going to have a create payment intent that I explained previously. For now, it's just going to return hello world. But another important endpoint that we need on the server side is going to be the one that we are going to use for Stripe initialization. Because when we initialize Stripe in our React Native, we need the publishable key. And as we can see here, it says to fetch the key from your server. I'm not sure if this is mandatory, because I expect us to be able to also put the publishable key in environment variables on Expo, because it's publishable key, it's like a public key. But for some reason we are saying to import it from, to fetch it from the server. So let's go ahead and add another controller that is going to return the publishable key. Export function. The function name is going to be get publishable key, or maybe let's do get keys. Maybe we're gonna need more keys there. It's going to have request and response, and what we're going to do is we are going to return, I already forgot how to return here. Is it rest.json? So let's do Stripe controller rest.json, and we're gonna return here the publishable key, which is going to be pub. The publishable key we can find on our Stripe dashboard. If you go there, we see the API keys here, and the publishable key starts with PK, and this one is going to go into our API.env, and let's go ahead and say Stripe publishable key is equal to our publishable key. Now back in our route Stripe controller, instead of this hard-coded text, we can take process.env Stripe publishable key. Now, all we have to do is back in our Stripe, let's add an endpoint. And the endpoint is going to be route.get. It's going to be /keys. And let's call the get keys controller imported from our Stripe controller. Question, Should we authenticate users before getting the keys, or should anyone be able to get the keys? I don't know. I would say that even an unauthenticated user, like a guest user, should be able to pay if they want to. But we can go ahead and add the verify token here before the get keys, and this way only authenticated users will be able to ask for the key. And how do we import the verify? Where is it? Middleware.js. We need to do .js here in the Stripe index of middleware.js. It should be relative path like this. So now if I'm gonna go ahead and send a request, well, if I don't have this one here, and I'm gonna go ahead and do a curl, maybe even let's open our Thunder client to do a new request. We're gonna do HTTP localhost 3001, that's our port, /stripe and /keys. Let's see what is going to be the response. Maybe it's not HTTPS, it's HTTP. And now we see the publishable key with the actual value. But as I said, we will need the verified token. But will we? Verified token. Let's add here guests can get publishable key, just as a note. And we'll see later if we need to protect it or not. All right, so now that means that our API is ready to generate these keys that we're gonna later use them in our client side to initialize Stripe. Before we move to the client side, besides initializing Stripe, we're not gonna be able to do much. So I suggest we go ahead and continue our server-side journey and add this create payment intent endpoint. So this create payment intent is going to be on our API routes Stripe. It's going to be inside Stripe controller. We have a create payment intent. All we have to do is we have to add it here under router dot. Is it a get? No, it's a post because we are creating something. We're creating a payment intent. So it's going to be payment intent. We are going to call create payment intent. Import it from Stripe controller. In this case, I'm sure that we need to verify token because we are going to need some information about the user, such as the ID, maybe the email, so that we can connect properly a customer that is creating the payment intent on our backend with a customer from Stripe. And later we can see these customers in Stripe. We're going to see later how we can navigate the dashboard to see that. Maybe I'm going to put it a bit lower, like this. Now in the Stripe controller, what should we do here in the create payment intent? Let's look in the documentation of Stripe and see what should happen there. I'm going to scroll down here in the accept payment documentation until we see this documentation for the server side to create a payment intent or payment sheet. Payment intents.create. So let's quickly review this part about the endpoint, and maybe I'm going to stop and explain more in depth like what happens here. So if you want to present a payment sheet before creating a payment intent, this integration uses this free Stripe API object, payment intent. So what is the payment intent? This payment intent, Stripe uses this to represent your intent to collect a payment from a customer. And it's used to track your changes attempts and payments throughout the process. So it's just information about your intent to charge a customer. A customer is actually optional, but you can use the customer for managing future payments. And also it's going to allow you to connect like multiple payments from the same customer. The customer ephemeral key, the information about the customer is sensitive, so it cannot be retrieved directly from an application. This key grants the SDK temporary access to the customer. So this key is basically a way for us to get information about the customer. And as we can see, if we never save cards to a customer and don't allow returning customer to reuse saved cards, it's optional, so we can omit customer and the ephemeral key object in your integration. It's going to be simpler, like every time someone pays, we are going to consider them as a guest, like as a new customer. For security reasons, your app can't create this object. Instead, add an endpoint on your server. So yes, to create these things, we need the private key, the secret Stripe key. We cannot do that on the client side in browser or even in mobile application, because if we use the secret key there, anyone can get access to it and can do bad things with our Stripe account. So what we should do is we should handle this information on the server. On the server, we're going to either create a customer, or if it already exists, we're going to retrieve it from Stripe. We're going to create an ephemeral key for that customer. And based on that customer ephemeral key, we're going to create the payment intent by specifying the amount, how much we want to charge, the currency, and the customer. Then this is going to return the payment intent, and it has a client secret, which we can share. Let's see. The client secret is a unique key returned from Stripe as part of the payment intent. This key lets your client access important fields from payment intent, such as status, amount, currency, while hiding sensitive ones like metadata and customer. So let's go ahead and follow this server-side code. As I can see here, what we have to do is to import Stripe. Let's do that at the top in the Stripe controller. I'm going to import Stripe from, not const, but we can do import. So I'm going to import Stripe from Stripe. Then we can generate the Stripe client. Should I do Stripe like this and here just do Stripe? I think that's better. Not to name Stripe client, but to continue using Stripe. Now, when we initialize the Stripe, we need the secret key. This is another environment variable on our API side that we need to provide here. So similar to how we have Stripe publishable key, we need the Stripe secret key, and this key we also take from our dashboard, from the sandbox, and we're gonna see it under API keys, secret key. Let's reveal it, let's copy it, and this one already starts with SK, which stands from secret key. Now in our Stripe controller, we are using process.env Stripe secret key. We can add an exclamation mark because we tell it like, hey, it's going to be there. Now that we have a Stripe client, we can go ahead and integrate or interact with Stripe. I'm going to do that here in the create payment intent. So let me put it as the second one because the first part is quite simple. But here, what we need to do is the following. Let's go into the documentation. And when we send the request to this endpoint, we're going to create a customer. So let's go ahead and create a customer by calling Stripe customers create. When you do create a customer, you can here provide information about the customer if you know them, such as the email. Maybe we can add here to do and come back later. Add info about the user. Now that we have that customer, we can go ahead and generate the ephemeral key for that customer. Also using stripe.ephemeral keys create, we give here customer ID and the API version. Finally, we create a payment intent. Let's add it below. So payment intent, Stripe payment intent, create the amount we want to charge, and this is going to be $10.99. We can talk about that a bit later. The currency we want to charge and the customer ID. And in the latest version of API, automatic payment method parameter is optional because it enabled by default. So we can delete this part altogether, because now that's the only thing that we need. So at the end, we go ahead and return the JSON with all the important keys. So response.json, we send the client secret of a payment intent. We send the ephemeral key secret. We send the customer ID and the publishable key. Now, if we go ahead and try to send a request here, and I'm going to add another to-do here to say to-do calculate the amount dynamically. For now, we hard-coded the amount. Later, we're going to calculate it dynamically. Let's go ahead and try to send a post request here. So I'm going to open our Thunder client. My server is still running. So here in the Stripe keys, let me do stripe dot, how is it called? Payment intent. Payment intent. And the request is a post request. If I just do that, we're going to see access denied, because first we need to authenticate the user. So under Thunder client, we can go into the login. Let's find login. Where is it? Off login. If I do that, we're going to get the token, and I can use that token in our previous request for generating a payment intent in the headers as authorization, and the value here is going to be the token. If I send it now, if everything works correctly, we see a payment intent key that we can later use in our application to start handling and charging the user the payment intent that we generated on the server. And I'm not sure if here in our dashboard we're going to see any changes, but we can check that because we should see a new customer. That's good. We can look at customers, and this is the customer. We didn't provide the name and email, but we can do that later. And what else? The transactions. We have a new payment, a new transaction, a new payment intent for the amount $10.99 that we specified from our server. The status of it is incomplete because the customer has not entered their payment method yet. So that's good, because the next step is going to be to use the payment intent secret and from our client side, show the payment sheet, ask the user for his details and handle that payment. So on the server side, the structure is ready. We're going to come back to improve it and add like dynamic fields, but at least we have the important pieces to start charging the customers. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do let's do Stripe server side setup. It's not ready, it's just the setup. Because now we can go ahead and from our e-commerce mobile start integrating Stripe here. So server side ready. Next step is the client side. What we have to do is first install Stripe. And the good news is that Stripe is also available in Expo Go. So we don't have to build a custom development client. What we have to do is run npx expo install at stripe/stripe React Native. in our e-commerce mobile. So from a new terminal, make sure to navigate to your mobile application. I'm gonna go into the e-commerce mobile, and here I'm going to run npx expo install Stripe React Native. Now we have Stripe there. And there is a config plugin that is optional, but with the config plugin, we can specify the merchant identifier and Google Pay. Merchant identifier is for iOS if you want to pay with Apple Pay, and Google Pay is for Android. I'm not going to cover them at this moment. Let's go ahead back in the Stripe documentation and see what we have to do. I'm gonna go back to the top and go through the documentation once again, but now I'm gonna focus on the client side changes. So yes, we have installed this one already, and we need to do Stripe initialization. To initialize Stripe in your React Native application, either wrap your payment screen with Stripe provider component or use init Stripe method. Only the publishable key is required. The following example shows how to initialize Stripe using the Stripe provider. So basically we need the publishable key that we take by fetching them from the server, and we see how they do that with the Stripe provider. So let's go in our application. And first I'm going to cover the e-commerce mobile API, and these are files that we used to create these fetch requests, like low-level fetch requests to interact with our API. Let's go ahead and create a new one here, stripe.ts, and it's going to have a very similar request like this one. I'm gonna copy an example. I'm going to put at the top this API URL, and we're going to send, maybe not, let's rename it to fetch Stripe keys. It's not gonna need any parameters because we are going to simply send a get request to /stripe/keys. Now we're gonna get the data. If there is data, we're gonna throw an error. Otherwise, we're gonna return the data. Now let's go ahead and fetch these Stripe keys from the application layout. And in this layout, we can go ahead and use the use query, because in our mobile application, we are using Tanstack query. So we can do const data is equal to use query. Here we are going to provide the query key. Let's do it as an array as Stripe, and then keys. And for the query function, we're going to call the fetch Stripe keys that we just created in that folder. Now this one should give data loading an error. We can rename the data to Stripe keys, and we can do here console log Stripe keys. Let's open up and see where we are running our e-commerce project. I think here it is. If I reload, it's not gonna happen because we are using this one above query client provider. The use query should be in component that has this query client provider, but it's actually outside. So that's why it's not going to work here like this. Can I provide here client somehow? Query client. Let me think. This is the layout. use that one, but let me double check something. Stack query, use query outside provider. Query client. So yeah, I need to run this one a bit lower. Yeah, probably I'm going to go ahead in the components, create a new component called custom stripe provider.tsx. Here, let's do export default function custom stripe provider. This component is going to receive a children, and in this component we're going to, let's start by simply returning children, basically like this. And here is where we are going to be able to bring in this use query fetch stripe keys in this console log, in the custom stripe provider, like this. Let's import use query from stack query and fetch this one from our API Stripe. And we're gonna go back into the layout and we're gonna render this custom stripe provider below our query client provider. This way it's going to have access to our query client. So let's render custom stripe provider and wrap everything in this one. Make sure to import from our components, custom stripe provider. And we can look into the logs, and now we already see information such as the publishable key. Good. What we can do with that publishable key, we can render here the stripe provider component, and inside stripe provider we're going to render the children. This way we're going to wrap children inside the stripe provider. Now this stripe provider needs a publishable key, and we're going to take it from our stripe keys, from the response from our server, as publishable key, because we saw that we have it here. Now if I'm going to comment out this one and do a clear and reload, I'm wondering what's going to happen if it's going to be undefined. Will it give an error? I don't see any errors, which means that most probably everything worked correctly. Maybe you can also like wait for a bit, like if there is no key, return a loading indicator, but I don't think that's a problem. I think it usually takes very fast until we get a key and Stripe provider will receive that one. And all the children are going to have access to a Stripe provider. So the first step is done. Now our application, our mobile application, and all the screens that we have there are going to have access to Stripe. So back here, let's see, in the documentation, we initialized Stripe. We can enable payment methods, but by default, we enable payment methods through the dashboard, but by default, the card payment method is enabled, so all good there. Then we need the endpoint to create the payment intent, which we already have done, so we can move on to the next step. And now it's about collecting the payment details. So before displaying the mobile payment element, your checkout page should show the products being purchased and the total amount, collect any required shipping information, and include a checkout button to present the Stripe UI. In the checkout of your application, make a network to the backend endpoint you created in the previous step to initialize the payment sheet, to create the payment intent. So this is where the customers will go to the payment page. When we get to that payment page, for example, if we go to the cart, here we have details about what we want to buy. And here, when we get to this page, is where we should create the payment intent. And when we press the checkout, we should display that payment intent. So that page is our cart.tsx. Let's open mobile application cart.tsx and go ahead and check the documentation to see what we have to do. Before displaying the payment element, we need to show products being purchased. Yes, we are showing that. We need to collect any required shipping information. I'm going to skip this for now. We need to include a checkout button. We have that one. And let's go ahead and start by initializing this. Okay, so we're gonna need a low-level method with fetch to send the request to the create payment intent on our backend. Let's go ahead and create this function in our mobile API Stripe, where we have these low-level functions. So let's go export async function, create payment intent. We're going to send a request to our API /stripe/payment intent. Is that the one that we have used? Stripe payment intent, yes. We need that to be a post request. So let's go ahead and add here parameters, method post, for headers, content type, application JSON, and we need to also provide the token, the authorization token. Let's look in our files how we got this token. For example, under orders, we got the token from the of store. So I'm going to take this part, move it to the Stripe, and at the top, we're gonna grab the token from our use of store. Make sure to import use of from at the top from the store of store. And now we're gonna have a token here. What else? Well, this one should also have if response.ok. If response is not okay, I'm gonna do a negation. I'm gonna throw an error. Otherwise, we're gonna get the data and let's return the data. Okay, so if this is a function, now back in our cart screen, we need to execute this function, we need to run it. In the example, they put it into a fetch payment sheet function and they call it in a function called initialize payment sheet, which later is called in a use effect on the component mounts. Because we are using Tanstack query, we can skip using these use effects and simply integrate this request using Tanstack query. So with Tanstack query, we're gonna send this request, we're gonna get this data, and let's see how to do it. Cart.tsx, let's go ahead and let's see where we're gonna do that. Let's do it at the top. My question is it going to be a query or is it going to be a mutation? Because a mutation is something that creates things, but a query is something that gets stuff. Here we are creating a payment request, but we are requesting it, we're fetching it. So let's try it with a query. Use query. Is it? Yeah, let's try. We're gonna see later. So this use query is imported from Tanstack query there. The query key is going to be Stripe, and here payment intent. The query function is going to be create payment intent that we just created in our API folder. Do you have here also on success? What happens is that I think no, on success is not here. It's only for the mutation. So I believe we need a use mutation. Let's do mutation function. And on success, we're gonna console log data. On error, let's console log the error. And we just need to fire that mutation as soon as we land on the page. So either with to execute it in a use effect, or maybe we need to do that. Can we fire it automatically? Run instantly. How do you do that? I want to run it instantly. Well, I'm not sure if it's there, so I can simply do that. I can run it in a use effect. Payment intent mutation dot mutate. Let's import use effect. And now we should see either the data or the error when we go to the cart screen. I'm going to open up the terminal and I'm going to navigate to the cart screen. If I go here, we see the data. We see the customer, we see the payment intent, and in our dashboard, we're going to see a new transaction being created. Here we have it. Okay, so we have data about the payment intent. What we need to do next is we need to initialize payment sheet. And the payment sheet is the pre-built user interface from Stripe that helps us charge the customer. So I'm going to, let's copy this init payment sheet and put it in the on success after we get information about the payment intent. Because after we have that, we can initialize the payment sheet. We can import it directly from Stripe React Native, even though I see that they are importing it from use Stripe hook. So I'm not sure if we actually need the use Stripe hook, but let's give it a try to use the use Stripe hook. Maybe it's going to use automatically the keys. So from use Stripe hook, we get the init payment sheet. After we create the payment sheet on the server, after we fetch the details, we can go ahead and call init payment sheet. Here we need the merchant display, the name of your shop. The ID is going to come from data.customer. Is it going to be data.customer? Let's double check that from the response. Where we can look into the Thunder client to see how is the response looking like. So it has a customer, which has the customer ID. So data.customer. customer key is going to be data dot. Let me do destructure things from data. So it's going to be easier here. So I'm going to destructure customer, which is the customer ID. The customer ephemeral key is simply called ephemeral key, like this. And the payment intent is this one. So payment intent. Set allows delay payment to true if your business can handle payments method with complete payment after a delay, like SEPA, debit, or credit. I don't think we need that. And default billing address, here you can provide more information about the user if you know it. And after that, init payment sheet. We can check if there is an error. If error, let's simply do alert error to display something to the user. So let's try to go on this one. We see something didn't go well because we see a warning. You have not provided the return URL field. Okay, that's a warning. We're gonna do that a bit later. But now we can go ahead and open the payment sheet when we press on the checkout button. And that's going to be the next step. So here is the method, open payment sheet, that we can copy inside our application. I'm gonna put it here, and we need to open the payment sheet when we press the button checkout. So on checkout, we probably create the order first to store it in the server, or maybe we don't create it until we collect the payment. It depends, we're gonna think about that, but let's call open payment sheet on checkout. And this is going to simply call this present payment sheet that we've got from use Stripe. And because we already initialized it, it's just going to simply show it. This is a way to display it. Now, if I'm gonna go ahead and press checkout, we see a new payment with $10.99 because that's what we hard coded in our backend. And here we can go ahead and use a test card like 4242 over and over again. And we can press pay. And boom, we have success. Your order is confirmed. And if we look into our transactions, we see that one of these payment intents that we created has succeeded, and we have charged the customer this money. And if we go to the home screen, we see our first charge being displayed in our analytics as well. So if you see this one, that means everything that we created, we connected correctly. Everything is working. Now it's time to polish it and make sure that we are charging the right amount, we're connecting data, we're storing data, we have this information properly connected, not only charging a random amount of money. But before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and do git status, git add, git commit -m, Stripe, React Native, setup. Perfect. What's going on here with the chat? How are you doing, guys? Is everything good? Because for some reason, did I lose internet? Am I live? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Yeah, I think I should be. There was a small drop in the connection. Sorry for that. Hello, Abilio from Brazil. How are you doing? Aftab is asking, when are you going to launch the master course? When I'm gonna launch the React Native Mastery? That's a good question. We have already announced it, and you can see it here on our website. If you go to notjust.dev/React Native Mastery, we are going to launch this course on November 26th. So if you don't know, I'm working for the last year on a new and up-to-date course on helping you master mobile development with React Native and Expo. And in this course, I'm going to teach you one of the best tech stacks behind the applications from the top. And we do that by building not one, not two, but actually 7 different projects, all of them with different complexity, targeting different aspects of building mobile applications, all the way until you build like one huge application together. So yeah, if you're interested in that, make sure to sign up for the waitlist. We're going to launch it on November 26th, and I really cannot wait to so that you can have also access to it. I'm testing it with 52 students, and they love it so far. Okay. So. What's going to be the next steps? Next steps is definitely going to be properly asking for the right amount, not 1099 that we hard coded on our API. So if we go to the API, to the actual API source, routes, Stripe controller, I don't know why we are returning this key like this. Probably I should do it from the environments, but we're gonna come back to it. So the payment intent here is using 1099 amount hard coded. What we should do is to calculate this amount dynamically based on the items that you have added to the order, based on the information from the database. So yeah, that's going to be our next step. Give me 1 second. I need a very short break, and we come back to continue this integration and add dynamically, charging dynamic price. So I'm gonna be back. Okay, so hope everything is good. Hope you can see me and hear me, and we can go ahead and continue. Yep, everything looks okay. All right, guys. So, as I said, we managed to go through the whole process of integrating Stripe, all the way from installing and creating the Stripe instance, the Stripe SDK on our backend, in our Node.js backend, setting it up with our private and the secret key, then generating the payment intent on our backend. Then from our Expo side, we install and set up Stripe. For a order, we have first we initialize the Stripe, then we fetch the payment intent for a specific order, and then we went to charge the customer. And now everything is done, it's complete. But we need to properly charge the right amount, to store the right information, to handle all of these things. So I'm thinking about the amount. Usually, the amount is something that you should calculate on the server. So yes, from our cart, when we call this create payment intent, we have a possibility to send here through the body, to send here the, for example, through the body JSON stringify, we can send here amount and the amount that we want to charge. But that would not be very secure because anyone from the client side can set a specific amount that they want. Instead of that, we have to send the items, the ID of the items and their quantity, and then on the server we should calculate the right amount by checking the prices from our database. So instead of this, we are going to have to send the items that we are intending to charge the customer for. But an alternative that I'm thinking right now is, what if we first save the order and simply send the order ID? Because knowing the order ID, it's going to be easy to calculate the total for the order based on the database. So first we create and save a order as a new order, and after that we try to create the payment and charge the customer for that order. So we're going to change a little bit the flow, how it works. So we're not going to create a payment intent right away. What we're going to do, I'm going to delete this altogether. And our payment intent mutation is not yet called. What we want to do is we want to first, when we press checkout, to create the order. And the mutate, I think, is going to give us back data if we do await. Let's just check if it will. Data. Let's do console.log data. If I do that, I think that I'm going to even do, after creating the order, I think I'm going to redirect to the order page, Being on the order page, we're gonna see the status that is not paid, and then it's going to tell us that we have to pay. So that's going to be a completely separate page. Let's try to do it that way, because after we have that, we completed the order, we said that we want to buy that one. Let's go ahead and create. I think if that is a good approach. If a customer is not paying, do you want to store that order in your database with a status not paid? And then later allow him to retrieve a payment. Yeah, I believe that's a good approach. So for that reason, in our application, let's go ahead and create a folder called orders. And we're going to have in orders a file called ID that is going to display one order by ID. So here we're gonna need to add some things, but let's go ahead and do it together. So export default order screen. Let's simply start by showing a text on the screen called order. If I'm going to go into the cart and say after we create the order, mutation on success, after we reset the cart, what I want to do is I want to do router.push, and router, we can take it from use router hook from export router. So after we create the router, we reset the cart and we navigate to the order data. Let's try. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna press checkout. It still shows me that one because in the on checkout I'm calling on open payment sheet. Let me close it and let me reload. And if I do checkout, it's going to create the order, store it on the database, and navigate me to the order details page. And on the order details page, we should be able to pay the order, right? So the order details page. Oh, I'm not sure if I want to get into this part. Because it involves some UI as well. Right, the brain is not braining today. Let's stay on the cart, because at least on the cart we have on the cart at least we have some user interface. Add to cart, and we are here. So let's think again, what do we want to happen? When we press checkout, we have create order mutation. Let me comment out reset cart and push from here, and maybe even the console log data, because I want to see if I get data here in this function. I'll press checkout and it's undefined. That means here I'm not going to get the data. But in the create order mutation, on success, I think I need to create payment intent and then open payment sheet, right? After we save it on the database, we have data, console log data. We have a order ID. So if I do checkout, we're gonna have ID 17. So based on this order ID 17, we can go ahead and create a payment sheet for that specific order. So that means that now when we call payment intent mutation dot mutate, we can send here the ID of a order ID, data ID. Now this parameter that we send to mutate is going to be passed all the way to the create payment intent here, and we can destructure order ID from here and send it through the body to our backend when we create payment intent. Now let's go ahead on the backend, API source Stripe controller, and let's see what is going to be at the top here, order ID from the body. Let's do a console log order ID. I'm gonna look into the API and I'm gonna press checkout, and we see 18. If I press once again, we're gonna create a new one and we see 19. So now we have this order ID here in the controller. All we have to do is to get the data from the database about that order. So let's see how we can do that on the server. If I look into the orders controller, create order, list order, and this one is get order. Here is orders with items. Can I just do... I think I can get only the orders because, yeah. Let's do copy this away database select from orders table, where orders table ID equal to the ID. Let's try that in our Stripe controller. I want to get the order from orders table from our database. Let's import the database here. Let's import equal from drizzle ORM, and the ID is going to be order ID from request body. Let's go ahead and do a console log order. If now I'm going to press checkout, it doesn't get here. Why? Let's see, console order ID. Cannot find source imported. Should be relative path .gs, I think, or without .gs. database.index.js. Yep. So now let's see again if I do that. 18. Where is 21 coming from? Where is 18 coming from? I don't know. But at least there is 21. And we have the order 21. Well, in fact, we don't need the... Well, we need the order. But more importantly than the order, one second. I'm going to destructure this order from there because it gives us an array, but I just need an object like this. Okay, more importantly than the order is going to be our order items. So order items is going to be await database dot select. I'm going to select everything from order items table, where we're going to use the equal sign, where order items table dot order ID is going to be equal to order ID. Now here is going to be our console log order items. And we should see all the items in that order. If I'm going to go ahead and add more things to the cart, if I do checkout, we're going to see 3 objects: first, second, and third. They have quantity and they have price. That's the only thing that we need to know in order to calculate the total. So const total is equal to order items dot, I'm going to reduce an array to one number, calculate total sum of order items price multiplied by quantity. I'm expecting the AI to give me, but it doesn't. Oh, here, reduce accumulator, or let's do sum and item. We're going to sum the accumulate everything into the variable sum by doing item price multiplied by item quantity. And we're going to start from 0. And this total should be the amount that we need to charge. Console log total. And we can also do console log order items. So now if I'm do checkout, we're going to see 3 items. And the total is $10.99. If we add these 3 together, it should be $10.99. Perfect. So now we have a total that we can use when generating the payment intent. The currency, we're not going to do it dynamically, so we are always going to charge USD. But the amount is, as you can see here, is $10.99, and the amount should be integer. A positive integer representing how much to charge in the smallest currency unit. Let's click on this link to read the documentation. So all API requests expects amount to be provided in the currency's smallest unit. For example, to charge 10 USD, we provide 1000 cents. So we multiply, for USD, we multiply it by 10 when we want to charge USD. Dollars, we have to specify it in cents. And for other currencies, you multiply it by a different amount. For example, for this one to charge 500 yen, you're going to provide 500 because yen, the smallest unit for yen is yen. So that's why what we're going, when we generate this amount, the amount is going to be equal to total multiplied by 100, and we need to use it as an integer. So I'm going to do math.round, and this is going to give me a whole number that we can use in the payment intent. Now if I'm going to go ahead and press checkout right now, and go to my dashboard into the transactions, the last transaction that we see here should be 10,000 and something USD, or I mean 1,000, and that's exactly the case. We have 1,099 USD. That was automatically calculated on our backend, knowing just the order ID. I don't think we actually need to fetch the order. Maybe we need to fetch it to know if it's paid or not, but for now I'm going to comment it out, and later if you need it, if you need information about the order, you can do that. All we need is the order items. And probably we can do, if amount is equal to 0, we can return some kind of an error, because we cannot charge 0. There is actually a minimum amount that we can charge. Okay, back into our client side. Let's go into the mobile application cart, and let's see what we managed to break and how to fix it here. Okay, back into the flow. The user presses the checkout button. We start the create order mutation. The order is saved in the database, create order mutation. The order is saved in the database. When it's successful, we trigger the payment intent mutation, creating the payment intent for that order. So this to do is done. Now we need to open the payment sheet, and opening the payment sheet was happening by calling this open sheet, but only after the payment intent has been fetched. So let's look in the payment intent mutation. We call that function. We initialize the payment sheet. And I think after initializing it, we can go ahead and call at the end here, open payment sheet. And this function is going to open the payment sheet, and if it's going to be an error, it's going to tell us. If not, the order is confirmed. And here is probably going to be where we reset cart and we navigate. But let's not do that yet. So if I press checkout now, it's going to save a order, it's going to create payment sheet, and it's going to display the payment sheet. Here we can go ahead and try to pay. Let's pay. And success, your order is confirmed. If we check here in our dashboard, we should have this payment as succeeded. Perfect. And yeah, as I said here, if there is no error, we can go ahead and do reset cart. And probably a better way, the best way is to redirect here to the order that we just created, or we can navigate to the home screen. Here we don't need to do anything extra. Let's try right now. If I press checkout, I can go ahead and pay again. Pay. If that is done, order confirmed, and the checkout cart is empty because we can go ahead and add new stuff. And this is going to have a different value. If it's cancelled, we are still going to be here in the cart. But it's interesting because we're still going to be here in the cart, but if we press checkout, it's going to create a new order. This is not really good because here, if payment failed, handle error. The order is submitted, but payment failed. So the order is on the table. If we're gonna press checkout again. We're gonna basically create a new order. This is not the best, but we can think about like what to do here. So now that we have dynamic pricing, we're charging dynamic data, we can go ahead and do git add, git commit, Stripe or amount based on order data from the database. Whew, okay, and what's going on with my internet? Map.floor is a better approach, someone is saying. Let's do that. In Stripe controller, instead of map.round, we can do map.floor. Let's do git add, git commit minus amend. And I saw there on the API something that I was not meant to be sent. Publishable key like this. Probably it should be taken from the process.env publishable key like that, instead of hard coding it. Something like this. And I'm gonna do again git add, git commit amend. Perfect. Git amend, I have never seen this one before. This is why I come to watch streams, because we get to learn new things. Amend is basically, instead of creating a new commit, you're just simply adding to the previous one. So here I'm just was fixing some small issues. So git amend. Yeah. You just modify the last commit. Oh, okay, all right. Okay. Let's go ahead and look into the documentation, because there are some things that we didn't do. For example, the setup return URL. When the customer exits your application, for example, to authenticate in Safari or to authenticate in their banking application, we need to provide a URL where to return. So what we need to do, like if we're using Expo, we can set up our app.json file, and in our mobile application, in app.json, we have the schema of our project, and this is used for the deep links. Now we can go ahead and tell when initializing, I don't know where it is, but when initializing our payment sheet, we can set up the return URL to specify where we want to redirect back. So the return URL is going to be set up when we initialize payment sheet. So in our mobile application card, let's see where we do init payment sheet. We can go ahead and add here return URL is going to be the one from app.json, this one, with your schema. Then you can either provide a custom return URL, or you can just say, hey, return back on the home screen. I think you can return back to the order details page, because on this moment you already know the order data, so you can directly redirect back to the order details page, so something like order/ID. but at least this one is going to redirect back to our application. Post-payment events. Stripe sends a payment intent succeeded event when the payment completes. We can use the dashboard webhook tool or follow the webhook guide to receive these events and run actions, such as sending an order confirmation email to your customer, logging the sale in the database, or starting a shipping workflow. Listen for these events rather than waiting on a callback from the client. On the client, the customer could close the browser window or quit the application before the callback executes, and malicious clients could manipulate the response. Setting up your integration to listen asynchronously is what enables you to accept different types of payment methods with a single integration. So that means that if we want to update them. Oh, Pro Evils, thank you very much for joining our community. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Welcome on board. Yeah, Daniel is just reminding me to let you know that there is the red button subscribe down below. That if you press, if you're subscribed to our channel, that helps us a lot. And from our analytics, we know that more than 99% of you watching right now are not subscribed, which is quite weird. Why would you watch and not subscribe? It's free. So yeah, thank you very much. Oh boy, where I was. Yeah. Oh, Francesco, thank you very much for the donation. You're so kind today, guys. Come on, let's go. Thank you, I appreciate it, Francesco. Long time no see. These weeks I'm skipping the weekly calls that I have with our students because I'm just so busy with preparing the React Native Mastery. And Francesco is one of our students that are currently inside the React Native Mastery. He joined during our pre-sale and he's helping us with feedback, with testing it out. And yeah, let us know, Francesco, how is it going with the course so far? Okay, as I was saying, if we want to go ahead and mark one of these orders that we are going to see in the dashboard, and let's go ahead and actually maybe open the dashboard by going into the dashboard. And here in the .env, we are connected to the remote. Maybe we can connect it to the local one, and we can do npm run dev. And we should run the dashboard. Let's open it up here. Maybe I can open it in another window. And if I'm gonna go here under dashboard products, I need to sign in, for example, as newgmail.com. Sign in. Here we have our orders. So if I want to go ahead and automatically update the status to paid whenever a user, whenever we receive a payment for a specific order, if I want to do that, I can either go ahead in our mobile application, in the cart. When we do this alert, if there is no error, we can go ahead and send a request to our backend to update the status of a order to paid. But that would expose like a security vulnerability because anyone could send that request like, hey, the order is paid, and we would update it in our system and go ahead and deliver it. Instead of that, what we should do is we should use webhooks provided by Stripe, which we're going to create an endpoint on our backend that is going to listen or is going to be there. We're going to tell Stripe, hey, whenever a payment event happens, send this information directly to our server. So this is a secure backend or server-to-server communication between Stripe and our backend. Stripe is going to notify our backend when something happens. And in that case, we know for sure that it's Stripe who is doing this call, and we can trust it and update our database with the right information. So let's go ahead and add these post-payment events. Okay, post payments. Where is some information about that? I mean, more information. Post payment events. Webhooks overview. So let's go ahead, create a webhook endpoint handler to receive event data as post request. So on our API, let's go ahead and open source routes Stripe index. And here, I mean, from the controller, we're gonna start with export async function. Let's call it webhook request response. We're gonna console log the body, and we're gonna send back like webhook received message. Let's go ahead and in the index, put it into the router as /webhook. So it's gonna be Stripe /webhook. Let's import the controller at the top. Now we can go back to see. Test your webhook endpoint handler locally using Stripe CLI. Register your endpoint with Stripe using dashboard. Secure your webhook endpoint. Okay, so let's follow step by step. Create a handler. It can receive post request. It needs to quickly return a successful status code of 200 prior to any complex logic that could cause that timeouts. For example, you must return 200 response before updating a customer invoice as paid in your accounting system. This is example with Express, that's very good. Webhook. We get the event. Here is handle the event type. Think I'm going to do this. I'm going to take inspiration from here. I'm going to go into the Stripe handler, and I'm going to add, let's do received true, and remove the one that we have here. Event.type. Where is it taking the event from request.body? So let's take event from request, or just request.body. Now if event type is payment succeed, but yeah, we're gonna see that event here in the request.body, so we're gonna probably see everything. Before we go live with your webhook endpoint, we recommend that you test your application integration. You can do so by configuring a local listener to send events to your local machine and sending test events using the CLI. So forward events to a local endpoint. To forward events to your local endpoint, run the following command with a CLI to set up a local listener. The forward to flag sends all Stripe events in test mode to your local endpoint. So Stripe listen forward to local host and something. Let's try to do that, and I think I'm going to use npx stripe listen and forward to Let's try to see. Gonna open another terminal, a lot of terminals today. npx stripe listen and forward to is going to be our API local host 3001 then /stripe /webhook. Think this is the one. Gonna determine the executable to run. Let's see how to install the CLI then. The Stripe CLI is the developer tool to help you build, test, and manage your integration with Stripe directly. We can install it on Mac OS, probably with Homebrew. You can check out for Windows or Linux as well. Let's install it. And then we're gonna have to log in the CLI. And let's go ahead and run Stripe. Is it Stripe? Stripe login. It didn't work. Update the software. Update from the software update. My command line tools are not up to date. Should I do that? Should I do this? Let's try. Okay, I first removed the command lines. Now I'm going to run this one to install them. And I should receive like a, okay, here it is, install, agree. Hello Prashad, how are you doing? Okay, waiting for the command line tools to be installed so that we could test like these payment intents locally with the CLI. While this is happening, I'm going to bring some water and then we continue with our building our webhook. So stay tuned. Why it's taking so long? 11 minutes? That's a lot. And let me see. Why it's taking so long? That was tricky to show like 2 minutes and then 10. When we open the application, it's directly showing the dashboard. Where? The dashboard application. Think initially it's gonna show like this template from Next, and only if you go to dashboard it's going to go there. But if you're not logged in, it's going to redirect you automatically to log in. Let's go. In the mobile application. But what dashboard? Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's what kind I wanted to do, because I wanted to let unauthenticated users to view products. But if you want to hide the products unless people are authenticated in your mobile application, what you are going to do, let me double check that. You're gonna need to create a new folder in which you're gonna put all the files that you want to protect. In that folder, you're gonna create a layout, and in that layout, you're gonna check if it's not logged in, you're gonna return a redirection like this. We've done this style of guarding like our whole application from unauthenticated users in a lot of projects previously. So you can check that one out. Prashad is saying, in part 1 you used Node.js and Express to create a backend, but you could achieve the same with Next.js when building the dashboard. Yes and no. I mean, there are different options, but for this one I specifically wanted to build an Express backend. So yeah, you can achieve things like that with Next.js as well, that's for sure. But I wanted specifically Node.js and Express. So what's going on there? 40 seconds. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Can we do it in this application also? What exactly? To do that, the guarding. Let's see if I have time until the end, because we still have a lot of things related to the payments. The software is installed. So let's go ahead and try again to run install Stripe CLI. What? It doesn't want to do that through this approach. Let's try this approach, manually going to releases, download macOS. For M1, do I need, which one do I need? Help my brain. Is it this one? So should I just move Stripe to okay, I think something worked. Stripe not open, Apple could not verify. Give me 1 second. Maybe I can do that through the system settings. Why Apple cannot verify? Maybe I need the other one. What do you say? Should I try the other one from here? Which one I downloaded? Maybe I need this one. Okay, tar XVF stripe. And now, same thing. I'm already thinking about skipping the local configuration altogether. Because for some reason I cannot get Stripe CLI I cannot install Stripe CLI. You know, these kind of days when just not working. I know I couldn't. I could try once again this one, but it didn't work previous time. Command line tools outdated. Let's see the command line tools. Oh, okay. William, figure out a way. So receive Stripe events in your webhook endpoint, listen to events. I think we're gonna go ahead and skip the testing of our handler and save it. Yeah, it's going to work. And what we're gonna do is let's go ahead and try to deploy our backend to our API, where we host our API on Genesio. And to do that, I'm going to run Genesio deploy. This is going to deploy it on Genesio, and there we're gonna look at the logs. Not very user friendly because locally we can do that easier, but still. So we detected Stripe. Do you want to set them for you? Yes, let's set. Why I press no again? So now if I go here, we have a full stack ecommerce, which is our express function. This is our URL. If I'm gonna copy it and go back to my funder client and create a new request towards that URL /stripe/web hook. And if I will send a post request there, we have a server error calling function. Let's go ahead in our logs on Genesio and see what are the server errors. Function call ID, cannot find module Stripe controller imported from Let's see how are we importing in our API source routes inside index, how we import Stripe controller. Yeah, we need to add the .js here. And in Stripe controller, we need to make sure we have .js for local files. And here, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and do that again. Okay, now if I'm gonna send this request, it's also error, but yeah, it has this. Let's do yes right now. And now let's send a request. Okay, so we get back received true, which means that our API endpoint is ready for us to start sending there or to give it to this Stripe webhook. We can give it to Stripe and let Stripe call it with the right data. So let's go ahead and go here, register your endpoint. This is the URL format. Okay, we have it. So we need to open webhooks in our workbench, click create new. Is it going to be on our dashboard? Is it going to be somewhere here? Yes, under developers, webhooks, we can go ahead and add an endpoint. This is the URL endpoint. This is going to be ecommerce API hosted on Genesio. Listen to events on your account, events on connected accounts. Let's set events on our account first. Should we select all events or maybe only checkout events or charge events? Well, maybe we can select all of them. That's a lot of events. And we're gonna be notified to our webhook about all of these events. Let's go ahead and do add event, add endpoint, and here we have it. It's saying waiting for events. And now I think we are going to receive an event when we go ahead and send a payment. For example, I'm going to add something to cart. I'm going to go ahead, check out. This should save a order, should create a payment intent. We're going to do a testing card with 4242, and I'm going to pay this one. Not a valid URL. Not a valid URL for what? For redirecting back. I think that e-commerce mobile cart. We just need one of them. I'm going to what? Payment intent created, customer created. This were sent, and I think we're received on our Genesio side. So in Genesio, if I look at the logs, we're gonna see this data console logged. So we see the ID with all that information that we can copy. Yeah, we see the payment intent. We see the amount, 249 USD. We see payment status. And the type is payment intent created. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and reload my checkout card, because this return URL, we didn't like it. So let's add a new one. Let's do checkout 4242. Pay. Perfect. Success. Which means that our webhook, if I'm looking at the Stripe dashboard, should have received the charge updated and charge succeeded. And we can actually look at what data it received. So data object, it received charge. How do we understand the event? So if this happened, we can go ahead and store some information in our database saying that, hey, this order has been paid. This is the customer. What is charge updated? Whatever information does it have? Paid true. Payment intent, the ID of a payment intent. So usually what you would do in this webhook, as I was saying, Stripe controller, is payment intent succeeded. No, I would do another case. I would handle payment, or what does it mean payment intent succeeded? Because we have both payment intent succeeded and charge succeeded. Yeah, I think this one means that the payment intent has successfully went through. I think we can handle it here. So if payment intent has succeeded, what we can do is find the order with that payment intent ID and update its status. The problem is that right now in our database, we are not storing information about the payment intent on the order object. So in the database, if we go into the order schema, I think we need to add one more field, Stripe payment intent ID. And when creating the order, we should store it here so that later we can find, based on a payment intent ID, we can find the order in our database. So after adding this one, Stripe payment intent ID, we should go to our API and do npm run db generate to generate a new migration, and it didn't work. No config provided. Can't find user schema. Oh, I think in the drizzle config here, user schema. Where is it? Order schema. For a second here, I'm going to switch to TS. Not the best approach, but we have to do it. I'm going to generate the migration. Yes, the file was generated, and I'm gonna go back to GS files. Now I'm going to do npm run db migrate. What? Is it the same PG driver for the database? Migrate. Why? Did it work? I don't know. We can look at that by going to Genesio database, ecommerce, and let's view the data. And we're gonna look at orders. Do they have? Yes, we have a Stripe payment ID. Now that we have Stripe payment ID, we need to store that Stripe payment ID when we create the payment intent. So in the API, I need to make sure that, okay. So in the API source Stripe controller, when we create this payment ID, we know the order ID. We are going to create the payment intent. So here we need to store payment intent ID in order database. So what do we need to do? Await update order table, set Stripe payment intent ID with the payment ID, where order tables ID equal to order ID. I think that's the right approach. Whereas the only way to test it out is to go ahead and to try to create a order. This one is going to work locally. I think it's good so far. So let's go check out. Let's go like this. Pay. And this order that we just created, let's look in our database. Orders. As you can see, the last order that we created also has the payment intent ID. Now, having this payment intent ID, let's look at what our webhook information is going to get. So if I reload this dashboard where we see what events were sent to our webhook, we have this payment intent succeeded. And if I'm going to search for this ID, we see that data object ID is the ID of our payment intent. So based on this information, we can find the order in our webhook. We have payment intent. It's gonna have ID, so we are gonna find const or await db update. How do we update? I already forgot. Orders table. We set status to paid, where equal sign, where orders table dot Stripe payment ID is going to be equal to payment intent dot ID. Maybe we can do the same. Another case here. Payment failed. And as you can see, we take the payment intent, we see that it failed. Or we can set the status to payment failed. Where is going to be this one? Let's give it a try. And now, actually, we need to deploy our API. So I'm gonna go back and do Genesio deploy. This is gonna deploy it to our hosted API, so that whenever Stripe is requesting or is sending that event to our webhook, we're gonna be able to update the database. Okay, now let's go ahead and try to create a new order. And what we expect is in the database, the order to be updated, the status of orders to be updated to paid. So if I'm gonna go here, add cart, I'm gonna do checkout. And I'm going to add a card here and do pay. First of all, let's see if the event was successfully sent. There is no things in failed, which means that I can look into our database. Where is it? Here, ecommerce. I'm going to run the query to fetch orders again. And there should be one new order here. At the end, in the orders, at the end, with this ID and with status paid, which was updated using our webhook. Stripe notified our backend and told us, hey, the payment has been successful. And the same thing will happen if, for some reason, I'm gonna add to cart, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna check out, and here I'm gonna use well, in the documentation, at the end of these docs, where is it? There are cards. This one is going to be payment declined. So I'm gonna choose this number for the card number. If I do pay, this is going to be declined. Your card has insufficient funds. If I'm gonna look into the webhooks that were sent, let's see what events. Payment intent, payment failed. And now if I'm gonna look into our database, the last order should have payment failed. Perfect. And we know, and we're gonna see this information in our dashboard. If we look at the orders, The last order with ID 30 is paid, but below that should be one with payment failed. I don't know why it's not displayed. This one is paid. Whew. That's good. So now our webhooks are working, but we are not done, because if we look into the documentation for these webhooks, we need to also protect them. So where was our documentation? We need to secure our endpoint. You need to secure your integration by making sure your handler verifies that all webhooks requests are generated by Stripe. Because right now, anyone that saw that URL that I gave to Stripe can send that request. Like if you saw this one, you can send a request and this way mark some orders as paid, which we don't want that to happen, and we need to verify if the request is coming from Stripe. You can verify webhook signature using our official libraries or verify them manually. Verify with official libraries. This is the recommended way. So let's see how we can verify that. Stripe requires a raw body of a request to perform. If you're using a framework, make sure it doesn't manipulate the raw body. Any more person to the raw body of a request cause verification to fail. So we need Stripe. We find the endpoint secret in your webhook settings. Request header Stripe signature. Then we try to do webhook construct event with endpoint secret. I think this is the part, right? Let's try it. In our webhook, somewhere here at the top, we're gonna do request.headers, maybe rec.headers, Stripe signature. Then the event is going to be construct rec.body sig. This is the signature. And endpoint secret. This is going to be, I'm going to take it from environment variables. So let's do here at the top, const endpoint secret, Stripe endpoint secret, which means that I'm going to have to go into the API.env and add a new environment variable for our endpoint secret. We get it from developers from here, signing secret, reveal. Let's copy it and let's paste it here. Now knowing this secret, we can check if the event was signed by Stripe by doing construct event here. So if we catch an error, we're gonna do response.send and return, which means that the request was not set by Stripe. Let's try to see if that will work. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy Genesio again, deploy it to production, and see if it's going to work. Error of type unknown. Error as error. Now our backend code is bundling. Let's do yes to set the Stripe endpoint secret as well on our backend. And that means that now, if I'm gonna try to send a request from locally from Thunder client to our Stripe webhook, if I'm gonna send the request, we should see webhook error, no Stripe signature header value was provided. But if I'm going to, even if I'm going to provide like Stripe signature header, like ABC, that means that I'm trying to hack the system, and this should not work because it's unable to extract and so on. But if the webhook is actually going to be invoked by Stripe, I expect it to work. So let's try it again. I'm gonna add to cart. I'm gonna create a new order. I'm gonna check out, and I'm going to do 424242. Pay. Yes, all good. And now here, if I reload, it didn't work. It didn't work because webhook payload must be provided as a string or a buffer. Yep. So basically it didn't work. It didn't work even when Stripe invoked it, because when we send here request.body, it expects to send as a raw body. In our case, we are parsing the body. We're parsing that body. Come on. In our index here, we have JSON, which is parsing the body to a JSON file. So that's exactly what we actually see here. Webhook payload must be provided as a string or a buffer. Instance representing a raw request body payload was provided as a parsed JSON object. Let's see how we can do that, because I'm pretty sure we can. Express get raw body after JSON, like it does that JSON get raw body. So exactly, to integrate with Stripe Payments API, I had the need to expose the raw body into an endpoint, and I couldn't figure out how. This did the trick. JSON verify raw body available. This JSON is coming from Express itself. Express JSON. Express JSON. The express JSON function is parsing the body. Why is it in Spanish? Let's see what options has this express JSON.
SEMrush.
What's going on? Oh boy, how do you do that? Okay, this one is based on the body parser. Oh, user control properties, for example. Options, inflating. This option is applied. Verify, okay. So I think I'm going to use, where was that documentation that I just checked? I was looking at a documentation. Here, so with verify, probably I can do that. Let's try. So in JSON, if I do here options, raw body, and if I'm going to take this raw body in our Stripe webhook instead of body, if I'm gonna check the raw body, will that work? I don't know. Let's try. I'm gonna do in the types, probably I'm gonna add here into the request the raw body buffer. Let's do deploy. Raw body does not exist. And Pato is saying, oh, this is how I feel every day on the job. Yeah, sometimes it happens. I know. That does not exist on type incoming messages. What? Source index. What incoming message? Should it be request from Express? Okay, function is deployed. Let's reload our application. Hopefully it still works, our API. If it doesn't, maybe oh no, it still works, so it's okay. Add to cart. Let's go check out here. Let's go with a 4-2 card and pay. Now, hopefully, if it was fixed, I'm gonna reload. My webhook, yes, worked. So now as we can see, the test has passed and we, on our webhook in our API, authenticated and made sure that the request is coming from Stripe. Because if I would try to do it myself, I wouldn't be able to do it. Where is it? Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it because the payload was provided. So now only Stripe or the ones that know my secret key can go ahead and hack my system. So make sure the secret key, you never expose it. You only have it on your server side, on your backend. So this way you can validate that it's indeed Stripe who is sending these requests and updating the data in your backend. Oh, nice that finally we made it work. So let me go ahead and do a git status, git add commit -m. This is going to be webhook events. And I'm gonna do git push origin main. All right, guys. So yeah, I think that we're gonna stop here. We have our payment integration working. Now our users can go ahead, add things to the cart, go ahead and pay them. We are saving this information in our database. We are listening with webhooks for these changes. We can charge customers. We integrate it in with our system. And to be honest, I'm super tired after 2 days of 4-hour live streams. We're gonna stop here with the payment integration. This is a very good base for you to start working and implementing it in your application, start charging your customers using Stripe. And I think and I hope that you enjoy this tutorial, you enjoy this huge project that was made out of 4 videos, 4 tutorials. Anyway, I think I have a very huge lack of oxygen in this room